Awesome. Oh, wait. Welcome to the Parenting with Confidence podcast. I am your host, Teresa Alexander Inman, board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. Now, today I am absolutely honored to have with me Brenden. Brenden. I don't want to botch your name, so I'm going to say it really slowly, okay? Brenden Kumarasamy. See, I did.
You got it.
Now, Brenden is the founder of MasterTalks. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk. Please go and check out MasterTalk. It is amazing, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools to everyone in the world. Now, there's a man who's doing it because of his heart. He's doing it from the heart. And if you listen to his YouTube, if you watch him on YouTube, you could see that it comes genuinely from the heart. And that is why he is here today to share his heart with you, with us, his knowledge. And I'm truly excited to have you here. Brenden, welcome.
Of course, Teresa, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So Brenden, I want to start off with a quote that you wrote. On there, in it, you said, "I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. So it's my duty to help her succeed with my free resources." That honestly spoke to my heart, and that's why you're here. Because when I saw entrepreneur and helping all these businesses, I'm like, how? Like, what's he going to do here? How can he help us? How can he help my audience? And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's it. So I would like you to speak to the parent of that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old girl who has, who they want to aspire, because right now she may not have the aspirations. She doesn't know, or maybe can't articulate, which is why we need to help her with communication. Can't articulate that. So please help her.
Absolutely, Teresa. So let's start with, why did I write that quote right on my bio, and why that's the ethos of how I lived my life. So I'll tell you a story on this. I was watching a TikTok the other day. Those things the kids play these days, right, on their social medias.
I have a TikTok channel. Don't knock it.
Oh, you do? I love it. So I'm on TikTok, Teresa, and I watched this video, and the video is about Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift, obviously, for those who are listening, the musician, very famous. Just look her up on Google. So the video is about her winning an award. And it's 2014, and she wins Women of the Year by Billboard. Billboard, obviously, music company. She wins Women of the Year. So she stands up on that podium, and she says something really interesting towards the end of her speech. She says, "Your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now. She's playing in a choir. She's learning how to sing. And she has big dreams to be a singer. And we need to take care of her." And then what happens is the TikTok flips. And then it's 7 years later. And Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in the history of Billboard and wins Women of the Year. She's like 17 years old. And she gets up on that stage. She's got her big puffy jacket, her big glasses, for those who know who Billie Eilish is. And she starts her speech by going, "Yo, what's up, people? I don't really know what to say. There's been a lot of women who won this award." And then at the end, she says something that completely transforms my life. At the end of her speech, she says, and I'll quote her directly, "Oh, Taylor Swift said this, and she took the whole speech away from me. But in 2014, I watched her speech, and I was 11 years old. I started playing choir the first time. I started singing. And the only thing left I have to say, Billboard, is thank you for taking care of me." And she walks off the stage. And when she said that, Teresa, it always gives me goosebumps when I say that story, is I thought about the next Elon Musk. Because when Elon was 15 years old, nobody cared about him. Nobody helped him with this communication. So he had such a struggle to become successful when he's raising capital, he's doing all these things. So I said, what about the next Elon? Because the next Elon might be like a 15-year-old girl in Cambodia or Kenya. And I realized nobody was doing anything for her. So I had to be that person.
That is so beautiful. And I have goosebumps now. Yeah, because I had goosebumps when I read that. And yes, because she could come from anywhere in the world, because you know what? You're providing that opportunity for her. You are going to help her hone her communication, because communication is everything. You know, I've noticed that because as a behavior analyst, I've noticed a lot of children, they engage in tantrums because they have not learned to communicate. So it is such a huge part of everything that we do, and not only vocally, but body language. All of those nuances of communication are so important. So, gosh, yes, that is so amazing. So, what can you tell her?
Absolutely. So I would say that the next piece is let's go into what's the problem in the education system. Why is, let's call her Julia. Why is Julia not living up to what she could be as a communicator? What's the problem? Because the problem isn't her. That's why I know we talked about before the podcast about how the fact that I coach a lot of kids, like 10%, 5% of my time. And the reason I do that is to understand the following. Where does the fear of communication come from, and where does it begin? That's the reason why I took on that challenge. And it was a challenge. Trust me, this is not a money thing. People who coach kids know this. I make way more money with executives. So the reason I started coaching these kids is to understand that. And here's my conclusion. When you have a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old kid, and you ask them to do some exercises we'll talk about today on the podcast, they're super open to doing it because they don't understand what the fear of rejection is or judgment. They're kind of just going, yeah, whatever. I pick a random word, a goose, and they start like present. But for some reason, Teresa, when they get to 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, a lot of these kids don't want to do the exercise anymore. They don't see communication as fun. Why is that? Because when they were younger, they didn't have that problem. And the answer is the education system. Let me paint a picture for all the parents listening to this. All of the presentations, Teresa, that we give in high school, elementary school have 3 main problems. The first problem is all of those presentations are mandatory. So we don't wake up one morning and say, hey, Teresa, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Nobody really says that, right? Right? I'm sure none of your kids or the people you've coached around you, never. Problem number 2, kids never get to pick the topic, and they're always different. So it's never like, Jennifer, what are you interested in presenting? Julia, what do you want to present? Do you like talking about makeup or soccer or football? It's always, you got to talk about Shakespeare. It's always, you got to talk about the history of Missouri. It's always, you got to talk about something you're not really passionate about. That's problem number 2. Problem number 3, though, is the nail in the coffin. Every presentation is tied to a punishment, Teresa. If you don't do a good job in the education system, you're 10 years old, you're giving this presentation in front of a bunch of other kids, and you don't do well, what happens? You lose 30% of your grade. You get hit on the head. You get punished. So yes, is it normal that we're scared of communication? Is it normal that we see it as a chore? Absolutely. And no one wants to get better at doing the dishes.
That's true. Yes, yes, so true. Because it reminds me of a study that somebody conducted, and they said when they would start at kindergarten. They'd go to kindergarten classes, and they would ask the children, "How many of you are artists?" And all of them would excitedly raise their hands. They got to grade 2. Half of them would raise their hands. They got to grade 4, and it's like, that kind of thing. Because we do that to children. I know I didn't want to present when I was in school. I would tell my professors, please, I'll write a 10-page essay if I don't have to stand in front of the class to talk. That was me. Or if I was doing it with a friend, I remember one time in grade 13, because we had grade 13 in Canada. So I was in grade 13, and I had to do a sociology project, and the girl, my partner, I mean, she basically did everything, and I just sat beside her and smiled uncomfortably because I just could not bring myself to say anything. I didn't know what to say. I mean, even though I'd done the written work, and she'd nudge me and, and I'd, spew out something really fast just to get her back on, because I didn't want to do it. I was not comfortable with it. So. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that story, Teresa. And I think what you shared is such a powerful example of what happens when you learn communication the wrong way. And that's what most of us are in, right? Because I don't think that was your fault. You're a great communicator right now, right? The way you're speaking. That's not the problem. It's the mindset. Let me give an example with little boys, right? Why do boys grow up loving sports? I would argue the reason is because the memories they have as a kid around sports is very positive. So I'll give you the typical example. Kids 7 years old playing basketball outside with their friends. There isn't a coach yelling at them and saying, "Hey, Billy, if you missed that bucket, forget about putting tonight." Like, it's like, no, you're just having fun. And then you're watching games with your dad, maybe your mom, your parents. So when you become 30 years old, you're 25, you're 35, whenever you think back to those basketball days, you have really positive memories.
Mhm.
So you become a customer of basketball, or more importantly, a fan of basketball. But 99.9% of all of the kids that grow up, there are exceptions, I'll go through them, but the most of the kids who grew up in that education system, all of them have bad memories. They have nightmares around communication. So naturally, that's what we adopt as behavior sets when we get older. Even if later on we share messages to help people to improve their lives, that's what communication is for.
Mhm.
The negative memories, that association creates a lot of pain that shouldn't even be there in the first place, because communication is supposed to be fun. Which brings me to the 0.01, and I'll throw it back to you. There are some kids who actually don't grow up like this. And the answer is simple. It's because they grew up in theater. The kids who grew up in theater don't have this problem because they see presentations as a way to perform, as a way to act, a way to give a performance. And we need all the kids to adopt that mindset too.
Yes. And it's so much more fun when when you're acting and presenting, and it's more dynamic and it's not so scripted, because, and like I told you, I don't do a scripted podcast. I don't edit my podcast because I want it to be genuine. I want people to see, okay, you know what? Yeah, we may make some mistakes. Don't you? The whole world does. So be comfortable watching and listening, because that's just, the world. So
Absolutely. I completely agree. And what you shared there is so true. It's like it's that playful mentality, right? But I think if there's anything that 0.1 or 1% of kids have taught me personally, especially the piece around theater, is they have a deep sense of purpose around communication, where it's like, no, I need to do well because my parents are watching and I need to perform this play. I need to do a great job. What if 100% of kids adopted that mindset? What if we could teach all of them? And I'm here to tell you all of them, because trust me, Teresa, Brenden ain't got time to coach all the kids. I'm going to tell you all of the strategies I use, because my hope is that all of the parents and educators, because there's a solution, there's easy tricks. I just want to give that frame first so people understand where we're coming from. But I don't want you to hire me. I want you to use all of these tips and go implement in the education system, because we need to do this to billions of kids, and I definitely can't do it alone. So I'm glad we have this platform to get this done.
yes, exactly. And that's what, my goal is to change the world, by empowering, because I used to say one family at a time, but that takes a long time.
Takes a long time. Yeah, it's a long time.
So I went to, I had to find a platform where I could empower parents and teachers to help me with that. And the more you share, I mean, that's why we're having this podcast. The more we share, the more we empower parents, the more we teach them to empower their children, so that we can make that change. We can get them out there and making that difference, boldly going out there with confidence and doing the things. And you know what? I made a mistake. So what? You learn from that mistake and you move on. So, my gosh, this is so exciting. Thank you.
Of course, Teresa. So now let's get into the fun part. What do we do? So I'm a parent listening to this podcast, Teresa. I got it, Brenden. I got the frame. Communication is not being taught correctly. How can I change the life of my children, knowing that fact? Besides the people who have the money for homeschooling, I have other alternative solutions which are simple. So the solution is simply this, Teresa. Let's start from the beginning. Everything, any skill starts with an incentive. If we have motivation to do something, we want to do it more. But now the question becomes, how do we create an incentive for kids to master communication. And this is a frame that a lot of parents don't take on. So let me tell you a story. Okay. One of the challenges that I've had coaching kids is that the challenge is not like, getting the parent to say yes, it's getting the kid to say yes. Because the kid don't want to do this. Right? So how do you do this? Because obviously, like, I'm sitting there and going like, shit, like, why am I even putting myself through this? But I learned so much that I can share. So what's the lesson? The first step to communication mastery for kids is creating that incentive. So let me role play. So let's say I'm talking to 8-year-old Billy. So I'm on the call with Billy, and Billy's going, I don't want to join this. I don't want to do this program. I say, perfectly fine, Billy. You don't have to do anything. But tell me, what do you like to do for fun, Billy? And then Billy goes, oh, well, and he's like trying to ignore me. He doesn't want to have this conversation. He's like, like, I like playing soccer. And I go, perfect. You like soccer. So I have a question for you, Billy. What do you think is the difference between a soccer teammate and a soccer captain? And then Billy goes, well, I don't really know. And I go, okay. Do you want to be a soccer captain or a soccer team member, Billy? Well, I obviously want to be the captain. And then I go, are you sure you want to be the captain? And then Billy says yes. And then I respond with, do you know what the main quality a soccer captain has, Billy? And then Billy goes, soccer? I go, no, communication. Communication. If you want to communicate and you want to be a soccer captain, you need to learn how to communicate. And Billy goes, I think you're right. And I go, do you want to join this? And then he joins. Yeah. Second kid comes up. I don't like sports, Brenden. I go, cool. Do you like YouTube? I go, yeah, I love YouTube. I want to be a YouTuber. I go, perfect. What do you think the best YouTubers on the planet? Who's your favorite YouTuber, Julia? Julia goes, my favorite YouTuber is Mr. Beast. Let's go Mr. Beast, the most popular. I go, perfect. What do you think Mr. Beast spends a lot of time on? And he goes, oh, videos and making them. Nope. Communication. How do you communicate? Do you want to be a YouTuber, Julia? Yeah, I do. Then you better work on your communication. Absolutely. So why am I telling you these examples? It's all about tying in what they want with what we want from them. So it's not about, so obviously if I was coaching you, it's a lot easier. Go on your pod, it's more of a mature conversation. Okay, Teresa, what are your goals? With 5-year-olds, that doesn't work. So we need to start with the incentive. That's exercise number 1. Exercise number 2 that I'm going to do with my own children when I have them someday is I'm going to have them argue for what they want. So if the kid comes up and says, Mom, I want this chocolate bar, instead of saying no or yes, I go make a 5-minute presentation as to why you want it. Right? Because now they have the incentive. So what will happen 90% of the time is they'll go, well, I don't want that thing anymore. I go, perfect. You just save some money. I just save people some money. But the 10% of the time, if they want that Xbox and you're willing to buy them that Xbox, they're going to make that presentation. And I'll give you a fun example. I'll throw it back to you so it's not a monologue, just to hear what's resonating with you as well, Teresa.
I'm loving this.
Yeah, you love it? Awesome. So I'll give you this is a real story, by the way. You'd be shocked to hear it's a real story. So one of my first ever kids I ever worked with, he wasn't budging. He didn't care about YouTube. He didn't care about sports. And I was having trouble. I was like, I don't know if I can figure this out. And I said, okay, let's call him, I don't know, John. And I go, okay, John, what do you want? Like, if you could have anything in the world right now, what would you want? And you know what he said? He said, I want a dog, but my dad won't get me a dog. And I said, now I have my sync. Now I have my sync in real. I said, okay, so you want a dog, right, John? He goes, yeah. So what if I promised you? What if we make a 5-minute presentation to convince your parents to buy you a dog? Would you do it? And then he goes, yeah, I would do it. Sign me up. So we spent by the way, funny story. His dad actually bought him the dog. It was hilarious. So every week he would show up and he would go, Brenden, is this good enough for the dog? And I would say, well, no, John, because you're just asking me for a dog. Let's say I'm your dad. I don't just buy you a dog. What are you going to do for me? And he's like, you're right. I should add in my presentation. I'm going to mow the lawn every week for 6 weeks. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to do this. I'm going to add up the value so it equates the value of the dog. Like, now you're thinking. And then by week 6, he presented that to his dad. And his dad was so impressed. He's like, yeah, let's get him a dog.
Wow, that's amazing. Love it. And, it does speak to all of the principles that, I've learned throughout the years. Because I don't know if you can tell I'm a little bit older than you are.
Just a little bit, maybe like 3 years or something.
Just a smidge.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 years.
But I remember in helping a teacher in a classroom one day, because I work with I work in schools and homes and, communities. So he was having trouble with a student. And I asked him, I said, well, what's the student interested in? And he found out that the child loved fishing. I said, well, tie the lessons to fishing, math, fishing, reading, fishing, everything fishing. That boy went to school and he focused and he worked because it was interesting. It was tied to something that was interesting for him. So and honestly, I never thought, like, all the concepts, everything that you're saying, the way you're tying it in to what I already know, I wouldn't have connected them. Like, I honestly would not have connected them. So that is wonderful.
Let's speak on that because that's so important. That's why I'm so excited about what I do, Teresa, because the reason why most people in my industry didn't do that is because they're not incentivized to. Because if you have 20 executive clients, right, you're already doing really well financially. So you're not spending that time to go into the weeds. Because you're right. The only reason I have those lists, because I don't have a background in child education like you do, based on what you said anyways, but I could be wrong with that. But I think the key is it was really through trial and error of really trying to figure this out that I'm glad, that it made my day. I'm glad that we're able to connect the dots here so people can take it, because it's not hard to do. You don't need to have $1 million. You don't even hire somebody for it. You can literally do the next time that you're talking to the kid, which also brings me to the most important tip that you mentioned. Have them talk about something that they want to talk about. It's like super easy. Just ask them, what do you care about? Puzzles. Okay, do puzzles. Just do a presentation, but make them do the same one over and over again and build their confidence up, and they'll be machines in no time. Easy.
I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago. Because like I told you, I was well into adulthood when I became comfortable speaking to people. And it was interesting because I ended up at a church in like Florida. And, this little church was literally across the tracks. And maybe like the attendance was like 20 at the most. And the pastor kept asking me to come up and speak. And I thought, well, no. And I asked him, I said, you know what? I hope you saw the daggers I was throwing at you every time you asked me to speak, because I am not that person. Because he did that, though, I became that person. I wouldn't be here right now if he hadn't insisted on me getting up in front of the church and speaking. And then I ended up getting a job at a hospice where I had to go into the community to speak, which was super fun, talking to people about hospice and just informing them, because we were looking to make some funds, we did a lot of fundraising. So I had to go out there and give that speech. Why should we donate to hospice? So, yeah. So thank you so much for that. So before we go, is there anything you want to share? Because we are going to do this again. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask you. I'm just a man.
You're the best, Teresa. I'm more than happy to.
Awesome. So before we part for today, is there anything that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I would say my closing thought, Teresa, would be, I really believe genuinely, and that's why I love this episode, that any human being can be an exceptional communicator. I really do. Because I'm case in point, like in the same way you talked about your struggles. I grew up in Montreal, in Canada. For those who don't know, Montreal is a city where you need to speak French, right? I didn't know French, but my whole life I studied in it. So obviously I'm fluent today. But every time I give a presentation when I was a kid, first grade, second grade, I was speaking a language I didn't know, right? So that's one. Two, I have a crooked left arm. A lot of people don't know that because of a surgery I had when I was 2 years old. So even today when I keynote, my left arm is still not straight. So I was really hard for me to make friends because I didn't know the language. And I had this big cast. Who wants to talk to this kid? Right? He's like, he doesn't know how to speak anything. And the third piece, you would think that a communication expert like me has like a PhD in communication, studied his whole life in communication. No, I have a bachelor's degree in accounting.
Right.
So my closing thought is empower the kids in your communities to do small little actions every day. Just start with the first one, which is force them to argue for what they want. and ask them questions around it. Force them to push that boundary, and that tip alone will help start their communication journey in a way that also saves you money. So that's also a good thing for all of us. So I'll leave you on that.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And like I said, we're going to do this again. I'm very excited to have you on again. And I know you've given us so much value. Like I said, I'm probably old enough to be a mommy, but I've learned so much from you, and I'm, absolutely honored that you took your time to be here. And I want to honor that time by, just thanking you again. And I will see you soon.
Of course. Thanks, Teresa.
My pleasure.